Tennessee, you've got at the bottom half of your list of the best coaching jobs right now, the 10 best college football Power 5 head coaching jobs, and you've got them at the bottom half. Run me through your list and tell me why. Well, let's start with why Tennessee's in the bottom half before we get to where they fall.
Okay, but let's be fair. Bottom half, these are still top 10 jobs in college football. So it's yeah. So I have Tennessee not in the top half. The thing holding them back the most is they're just not in a fertile recruiting area. I mean, they're not in a state where they can they can't just stay in their state and build a championship team. And that's where I would say Tennessee's in the bottom half. They got a lot of other factors going their way. I mean, they have the best NIL initiative in college football right now. And that's a huge advantage to have that initiative. They're uniquely located to be able to pluck guys out of Georgia, South Carolina, the Carolinas, and Alabama. And these things make them a top 10 job, but they are not. And also a big advantage for Tennessee, and this is the thing that matters, competition in your state. Tennessee has, even though there's not great in-state recruiting, Tennessee at least doesn't have any competition for their in-state. Vanderbilt and Memphis are not threats to get top talent in the state of Tennessee. They go to Tennessee usually.
So let's go through this list, and I'm going to play a little hey now or heck no. And as far as better coaching jobs than Tennessee, you've got number 1 LSU.
Hey now.
I'd have to agree with that with the in-state talent. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You can still win at Tennessee, but in-state talent at the end of the day is covering recruiting like I have. I'm going to more often times side with that than not. Georgia.
And competition for in-state talent. There's no other Power 5 school in the state of Louisiana or within hundreds of miles of LSU, quite honestly.
Absolutely. Georgia, different because there is competition, but incredible in-state talent. I agree. Hensley, what do you say?
Hey now.
Hank agrees. All right. Ohio State, better job.
That's crazy.
Here's why I say it's not a better job, because it's in the Big Ten, and I think just by the nature of being in the South, that you're going to be able to recruit better talent in the South. But I definitely see your argument, and I think you would be in the majority there.
Yeah, Ohio State's a better job. First of all, you make it sound like being in the SEC makes it a better job. That means you got more competition. Ohio State's an easy job because they can lock off. By the way, Ohio and California are the two non-Southern states that compete with Southern states for NFL talent. I mean, look at the amount, and Pennsylvania too, but look at the amount of talent that comes out of Ohio into the NFL, and Ohio State competes with nobody for that talent. I mean, let's be honest, Dave. Michigan, so like Oklahoma goes into Texas and gets talent. Michigan doesn't come into Ohio and get talent. They are a clear-cut second fiddle to Ohio. They get Ohio State rejects, quite honestly. They have to go to Pennsylvania before Ohio State. And that's why I have Ohio State.
Okay. Southern California.
That's crazy.
I'm not taking Southern California as a better job than Tennessee because of the kids that I've covered there. Football is not as big of a deal. Even if you want to take Nico, he also placed a big importance in volleyball, which some people wanted to say was a bad thing. It wasn't a bad thing because he was supportive of his team, and I agree. I think that's awesome. But I don't think those kids in Southern California care about football nearly as much. I don't think it's a live or die thing. And I think that Southern California is now in the Big Ten. I think the travel issues are going to be significant. So maybe I would have taken them when they could just dominate the Pac-12, but I'm not taking them now that they're in the Big Ten over Tennessee. Thoughts?
I am. And I look, I've covered Tennessee recruiting and I've covered other recruit. And I remember USC recruiting in the mid 2000s. Tennessee recruited great in the 90s. USC recruited right on that level in the mid 2000s under Pete Carroll, and they didn't have to leave the state. And quite honestly, it's even going to be easier for them now because they just if you're a kid in California and you want to stay in California, you might have considered Cal or Stanford in the past. You're not considering them anymore with USC in the Big Ten and with UCLA. And by the way, between the two, you're picking USC. So yeah. And their NIL initiative is pretty big too.
Yes. So how about, well, obviously they were able to pull the Biletnikoff winner in 2021 over, and not to mention a guy named Caleb Williams as well. I mean, they just instantly set up shop via college football free agency. What about Alabama?
Hey now.
I think it's a better job. I think it was debatable before Nick Saban, debatable, but I think it's a better job because of in-state talent, more tradition than Tennessee, even though that at some point has to hit a tipping point where you've got so much tradition. How much more do you need? But
And
yes,
tradition doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it matters. It matters in how you built a program. I mean, if you went and looked at TCU's facilities, they're not at the same point as Tennessee's because of lack of tradition and giving and donations over years. So maybe I'm tying two together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I factor donor base more than tradition, but you're right. Tradition builds the donor base. So I guess that's fair. You don't have the donor base without the tradition. I would say with Alabama, I kind of disagree even before Nick Saban, because here's my thing. When you have a bad coach and when you're a program in trouble, can you still be good? Let's just compare two. Derek Dooley had 3 straight losing seasons at Tennessee. Mike Shula, who I think you and I would agree was probably on the level of Derek Dooley as a coach, right? About the same type of coach.
Pretty good comparison, yeah.
Mike Shula still managed to have a 10-2 season at Alabama and finish in the top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're a bad coach, you can get a top 10 year at Alabama. Ask Mike DeBose.
Have I told you my Mike Shula I gotta pee story before?
No.
Mike Shula walks in SEC Media Days. I'm the first guy that's standing there because I knew kind of where to be to interview them one-on-one. And I say, hey, Mike, it's Dave Hooker within, I guess, WNML or whatever it was, WNOX. And I said, do you have a minute? And his sports information guy goes, yeah, you can go ahead and do this quick one here with Dave. And Mike Shula goes, where's the restroom? And he was so blown away by 500 people waiting there. And also, it was in Birmingham, so you had a lot of Alabama people, too. He was just blown away. It was like, where can I escape? Give me a urinal, please.
Oh, gosh. He also complained about Smokey biting an Alabama player. I remember that one. But
yes. Texas A&M, a better job than Tennessee.
That's crazy.
I know why you're going to say it's a better job, but it's not, because you have to compete with the next school on the list, and that's Texas. Why is Texas A&M a great job?
It's got the 3rd largest NIL initiative, or 2nd largest, just behind Tennessee. And if you divide, there were only 3 schools now that legitimately compete for Texas talent: Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M. Well, if you divide the NFL players from Texas by 3, there's still more than Tennessee players. So I mean, that's the thing. There's so much talent in Texas to go around. And I would have disagreed.
It's stupid crazy.
Yeah. Now, back when they were all in the Big 12, it was one thing because, TCU could adequately compete and things like that. They're not competing with Texas and Texas A&M when they're in the SEC, though.
No, you're right. All right. How about Texas? A better job.
Hey now.
See, I would take Texas over Texas A&M and Tennessee because they are the state school. There was a time where I thought A&M could overcome them, and maybe they did for a brief little moment. But I think when we look at it over the course of 100 years, we would all say that Texas is the better program, right?
They're the better program, not the better job right now. One, Texas A&M's in East Texas, so they're actually uniquely positioned where the football talent is. Where University of Texas is not where the football talent is in that state.
All right. So then you've got Tennessee at number 8.
I'm your huckleberry.
Why?
So the biggest advantages for Tennessee, like I said, is they have the number 1 NIL initiative. They have no competition for in-state recruiting, and their in-state talent is not terrible. I mean, it's still one of the better states in the country. It's just one of the worst states in the SEC. So that's what makes it a little difficult. But I still don't think it. But it's still a really good job with NIL and then the talent you can get around you.
All right, UCF, you've got it number 9, and I don't know if you're just trying to gig me or not, but it sounds like
that's crazy.
All right,
you ready for this? All right, I'm gonna break this down. UCF is in a Power 5 conference. Florida is a dominant football state with recruiting. But Florida State and Miami, they're about to fall off the map because there's no way. I don't care about that stupid CW deal you guys want to tell me about with the ACC, okay? There was no way with the budgets
that's an absolute embarrassment. I don't want to get sidetracked, but when you're on the CW, I mean, good gracious. What do they follow that up with? Bull riding? I mean, you're on the CW, for instance. I don't even know where the CW is on my state or my direct TV thing.
So Florida State and Miami, their TV revenue payout right now, because they're in the ACC, is a third of what UCF is going to be in the Big 12. So UCF is about to overtake both of them. Okay, now it comes to UCF and Florida. Dave, I think, and you tell me, I think the Florida brand is still toxic because of Urban Meyer. I think it's underrated how much Urban Meyer made that brand toxic for recruits for a long time. They're about to have a documentary next month on how Urban Meyer ran that program into the ground.
Yeah, I saw that. I wouldn't say that he still has an effect, but it's interesting you bring it up. I'll give it some thought definitely over the weekend. And then you've got Oregon as a top 10 job.
That's crazy.
Here's why I think that's crazy. People want to talk about Phil Knight and the money he puts in it. They've got the cool jerseys and all that stuff, but they've done all that and they still haven't won a national title. They had Chip Kelly, who was ahead of the curve. They still haven't won a national title. I think of the great football teams, you want to talk about Georgia and the defensive tackles that they've had, and they didn't just have one or two of them. They had 2 or 3 or 4 of them that would rotate in. The great teams that Tennessee had, that had the Albert Haynesworths and the John Hendersons at the same time. And then like your fall off is oftentimes at Tennessee and Abreu Franklin, who gets another shout out 2 days in a row. And he had a good NFL career. I don't think Oregon will ever get those cats. I think they'll get the fast guys. I think they'll get the guys that want to play quarterback in that system. I think they'll get all those guys, but I don't think they'll year to year have 2 great defensive tackles that win you championships. I don't think they'll ever have those guys. So if they get to the college football playoff, it's going to be tough to win. So I would not have them in the top 10. I would actually more along the lines have another SEC school. I'm just throwing out Florida off the top of my head. I would not have Oregon in the top 10 because of defensive tackle, one position, because those cats aren't up there. They're all over in the South.
So I'll give you that. One thing I didn't think about is I made this list still thinking a 14 playoff, but you're right. In a 12 team, you can fluke your way to a national title in a 14 playoff, but you can't fluke your way in a 12 team playoff. At that point, you're going to have to you're going to run into a team where you're going to have to be more physical than, and at that point, Oregon can't do that. So I could go, I just can't think of an SEC school because look, Auburn is not a top 10 job. And also you don't want to live in Auburn. Like that automatically makes it not a top 10 job. And South Carolina, you're competing with Clemson. I mean, and Florida State and Miami, if you go ACC again, all ACC jobs are bad jobs right now. Every one of them until those schools break off from the ACC.